There's a reason that your rearview mirror is so small and your windshield is so big, because that rearview mirror focuses on what's behind you, and that windshield lets all the light into the moment of where you are right now. And that's what we want to focus on, is right now. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Fill in the Blanks. I'm Dr. Phil, of course. We've been talking about toxic personalities in the real world. You know, we covered narcissism, and then last week we started talking about borderline personalities. And this is the second time I'm talking about borderline personality, because you encounter a lot of people like this. I know, because you've asked me about it a lot. And if you didn't catch last time, then it's in the library and you can go back and listen to it. Just a quick focus. Borderline personality disorder is kind of what we're talking about when this is present in the extreme. But remember, I said that all of us are on a behavioral continuum. And you may have a lot of the characteristics that we're talking about with borderline personality disorder, but you may not have them to the extreme, or you might be married to someone or have a sibling or someone you work with that has some of these characteristics, but they don't have them all, or they don't have them to the degree that they would qualify as having the disorder. So when I talk about it, I'm talking about it in the extreme when it reaches the level of being diagnosable. And to be diagnosed, there are like 9 characteristics of the borderline personality that I went over last time. You can see them. I'll talk about them quickly here in a minute. You only have to have 5 of the 9 to get the diagnosis. But we're talking here about patterns. You know, somebody might have these traits or characteristics or symptoms pop up for a day or two or in crisis, but not in pattern. So that doesn't mean that they have a borderline personality disorder. It just might pop up in pattern. But it's defined as a pervasive pattern of instability of interpersonal relationships, or instability of self-image or emotions, and marked impulsivity. These are really impulsive people. It's usually beginning by early adulthood, and it's present in a variety of contexts. So it's not just specific to home or then specific to work. It's present in a variety of contexts. That means they're the common denominator. They take this with them wherever they go. We also talked about last week that there are 4 subtypes here. Those that are discouraged and quiet, the really impulsive ones where that's the primary characteristic. These are the ones that are energetic and charismatic. They can also be very cold and hostile, but they're easily bored. They take high-risk behaviors. They're also the ones that are into self-mutilation sometimes and are at high risk for suicidal behavior. They're very resistant to treatment. There's the petulant. These are the ones that are angry. They feel very unworthy. They tend to have more eating disorders with this particular subgroup. And then there are the self-destructive. They're the bitter, self-hatred. These are the attention seekers. And talk about high-risk behaviors. These are the reckless drivers, drugs. They're promiscuous. A lot of eating disorders here. So there are 4 different types, and those are on the website, and I talked about them last week. Now, here's the thing that you need to understand about these folks. I said to approach them with some compassion, but boundaries. These folks don't experience this in isolation. There's a lot of what we call comorbidity. It occurs with a high frequency of anxiety, depression, eating disorders, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, PTSD. It does occur with bipolar. It's often misdiagnosed, but they can have both. They can have changes that happen within the hour or within a day, and they can also be bipolar where there are cycles that take much longer to cycle around. Now, Dr. Perry Hoffman with the National Education Alliance for Borderline Personality Disorders made this observation, and I thought It was really interesting. She said, this is one of the disorders that really needs an interpersonal relationship to express itself most of the time. You could take a schizophrenic, for example, and parachute them on to a deserted island alone, and you would still observe their schizophrenic behavior. Let's say they had auditory or visual hallucinations. They would still have them on a deserted island by themselves. And you would be able to observe and see that if you had hidden cameras and you were monitoring them. The borderline personality disorder, you might not see nearly as readily because it's so relationship dependent. It's based on how they interact with other people, and there's nobody there to interact with. It wouldn't be as obvious. Now, there is disturbance of identity of self, so there might still be evidence in the fact that they didn't know who they were as clearly. They didn't have a clear, well-defined self-image, but that would be pretty internal, and so you wouldn't see it as obviously. But I thought Dr. Hoffman had a great observation when she said this is one of those disorders that's relationship dependent. You have to be in a relationship for it to fully manifest itself. So you might have someone that you're observing in your life, and if they're not in a relationship, maybe they're in IT, they're working in computers or something, and you don't observe them in a relationship, these things might not pop out until you start interacting with them or you start observing them in a relationship with somebody else. Children that have been raised this way get real good at reading other people because you become hypersensitized to watching your borderline parent. You're watching for this mood change. You want to know when to duck and run, when to find somewhere else to be, when to get out of the situation where you don't have to put up with all of the wailing and blaming and shaming and crying and all of that. So you learn to watch and read, but they don't learn to measure their own internal emotions. They don't learn to measure what's real within themselves and pay attention to how they're feeling. They don't label their own emotions. They don't realize, hey, I'm feeling a lot of shame here. And so they're real good at reading other people, but not real good at reading themselves. They do have strong feelings of shame. There's a lot of codependency there because they're reflecting this caregiver, this mother or father that's engaging them, sucking them in. Children find a hard time setting up boundaries, so they get sucked in by this instability terribly. And then, as I say, if you're on the bad side of that splitting, boy, it can be really, really tough. If you're living with a borderline personality parent, or you've been raised by a borderline personality parent, think about it. You'll spot these things if you look back now. They'll describe opportunities as being completely safe or total con. Don't go out with this person. Don't let them be your friend. They'll describe your friends as either evil and crooked or just absolute saints. These are just angels. They're just perfect. When they hear something, we've been through the pandemic and you've got a lot of people talking about COVID and should you wear a mask or not? Should you get vaccinated or not? Should you quarantine or not? Et cetera, et cetera. In splitting, they're going to decide this is either a complete lie or it's the absolute gospel. They won't take it all in and weigh the preponderance of the evidence and make a decision based on the different facts, evaluate them carefully, thoughtfully, and make an informed decision. No. They're going to decide this is either the absolute gospel truth or it's a complete lie. Again, they live in the emotional extremes. You just need to watch out for it and know that this is something that can be treated. If you've been raised by a person like this, or you know somebody that can, just know that they do respond to treatment. And, what is the treatment? Well, it's a form of cognitive behavioral therapy. Dialectical behavior therapy is an evidence-based therapy that does have some good success with borderline personalities. Now, I'm not saying that you cure this and all of a sudden it just goes away, but DBT is a cognitive behavioral therapy with added strong emphasis on change, acceptance, and acceptance on balance change. We're talking about identity and change of negative internal dialogue and pushing for positive behavioral change. And what I mean by identifying and changing negative internal dialogue is you get the person to listen to what they're saying to themselves. Because if you heard the internal dialogue of a borderline personality disorder individual, they're saying a lot of catastrophic things to themselves. And I'm a big believer in the power of language. Ask yourself what you're saying to yourself. Do you use a lot of catastrophic language? Are you the kind of person that says, "Oh, that was just horrible. My day was horrible"? Well, words are very powerful, and they bring a lot of meaning with them, a lot of baggage with them. And if you say something, "Oh, that was the most horrible day of my life. It was just terrible. It was just catastrophic." Those are big words as opposed to, "It was a very annoying day." The difference between horrible and annoying are really different when you stop and think about them. Horrible is having full depth burns over 70% of your body. That's horrible. Having to put up with this annoying person sitting next to you at work who talks all the time and bugs you, that's not horrible. That's inconvenient. That's annoying. So part of dialectical behavior therapy is getting the person to listen to what they're saying to themselves, identifying what they say to themselves that's really negative. You're no good. Nobody likes you. Everybody's abandoning you. This was horrible. It was terrible. And changing that, and then pushing for positive behavioral changes, behaving their way to success. It's not trying to blow smoke up and say, "Oh, hey, everything's fine." Everything's not fine in life. And there's a lot of value in learning to accept the fact that everything's not fine and toughening up where you have some tolerance for distress, so you don't fold in the face of any kind of adversity. DBT helps these people, particularly those with borderline personalities, to not overreact, to just say, "Okay, that was not good, but I can handle that." It raises their tolerance for distress where they don't melt down and fall apart emotionally whenever they face adversity. They come up with change-oriented strategies. Here's how we're going to do this differently. You used to do A, we're going to learn how to do B. And they teach interpersonal effectiveness as part of this therapy. Here's how to handle your relationships in a way that are much better for you than what you've been doing. A big part of this is what's called mindfulness. This is often where each session will begin. You develop the ability to observe and accept versus judging and avoiding. Now think about that. Observe and accept what's going on in your life, in your relationships, at your job, at home. You observe it, Say, okay, I see what's going on here, and I'm going to learn to accept that instead of judge it and run from it. That's what I mean about distress tolerance. Mindfulness is a big part of this. Awareness of the moment. You live in the moment and you learn to accept it. You focus on the moment and accept your feelings, thoughts, and your body sensations and say, okay, I'm okay with this. I can live with this. And this is kind of a meditative exercise where body, behavior, emotional awareness without judgment. You might say, I get anxious when I come into a room because I'm so used to being rejected and abandoned that I get this anticipatory anxiety. Well, okay. All right. We're not telling you you don't. What we're telling you is acknowledge that and learn to live with it. We're not trying to tell you to pretend that that doesn't happen. Then it happens. Then, okay, let's learn to observe that and accept it. If you walk in the room and it happens and you've learned to observe it and accept it, then you say, okay, this is the anxiety that I knew was going to happen. It always happens. And it always goes down. It always abates after a little time. So I'm going to accept this. I'm not going to judge it. It just is. And maybe I'll learn how to deal with this at some point, but right now I'm just going to observe it and I'm going to accept it. You identify these difficult emotions without self-criticism. It's not about whether they should be or not. They just are. Think about that, because that's good for everybody, in my opinion, whether you are dealing with a borderline personality or not. Sometimes we just have to accept what is. This just is. This is just part of our life, and we have to raise our distress tolerance levels. And I have to say, I think the world could really benefit from raising our distress tolerance right now, because it seems like we're pretty hair-triggered. And I think if everybody could toughen up a little bit and not be so hair-triggered and so quick to be offended, even at ourselves, we would be better off. It's about the here and now. It's not about focusing on the past or the future. It's not judging yourself for the past. You always do this. You've done this a million times. I'm so sick of you. No, we're not going there. We're not going to live in the past. You know, there's a reason that your rearview mirror is so small and your windshield is so big. Because that rearview mirror focuses on what's behind you, and that windshield lets all the light into the moment of where you are right now. And that's what we want to focus on, is right now. Focusing on the moment really helps you get into stress reduction. So there is a way to teach borderline personality disorders to be less reactive and more accepting of themselves and others. And research tells us this is what's called an evidence-based therapy, meaning that there is evidence that this therapy does have positive results for those that have this disorder. Now, I want to talk about some do's and don'ts. Here are some do's. If you have borderline personality people in your life, or you are a borderline personality, do get educated. You do want to learn about this disorder. And the thing is, if you've got a laptop, iPad, smartphone, computer, you're walking around with a library. You know what a library is. It's a big building with books in it. We used to have to go there to get information. Now we can just kind of punch it up and read it. You want to educate yourself. Knowledge is power. And if you can educate yourself about this disorder, it will help you cope with it, whether it's you dealing with somebody else or dealing with yourself. You do want to get personal help or support because you have to take care of yourself. It's particularly important if you're living with someone that has borderline personality. And you may say, hey, Dr. Phil, you're my helpline. I don't have money to go to a therapist or whatever. Okay, maybe this is your education. And there are support groups out there. You can find them on the internet. People that live with borderline personalities, that were raised by borderline personalities. But the important thing is you've got to take care of yourself. When you're dealing with a borderline personality, you want to use open-ended questions in what I call a two-way communication model. Now, I'm going to take a minute to spend on this. You don't want to ask yes or no questions. You want to ask open-ended questions. And an example is you can say what you want them to hear you saying, but you need to finish it with, tell me what you hear me saying. Because if you don't, you have no idea how they've interpreted what you've said. You may say, hey, listen, I'm going to have to cancel our plans this weekend because my mom called and she's coming in town, so I'm going to have to entertain her this weekend. So is that okay? That's not an open-ended question because you're going to get a yes or no. Is that okay? Yes. What they may have heard you say and how they may interpret that is, I'm tired of you. I don't want to spend time with you anymore. You're not good enough for me. I'm not going to spend any more time investing in you, and I'm leaving you like everybody else in your life has. Okay? You say, well, wait a minute, that's not what I said. No, but that's what they heard. And in a two-way communication model, there's a feedback loop where you say, tell me what you heard me say. And you may say, well, that's kind of offensive, isn't it? No, it's not. Just explain and then say, I'm going to take care of my mom this weekend, so tell me what you're hearing me say. If you said, do you understand, that would be yes or no. You've got to finish it with, tell me what you're hearing me say. Give me some feedback. And then they will reveal, well, I hear you saying that somebody's a lot more important to you than I am. Whoa, 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 whoa. That's not what I said. This is about timing. My mother's coming in. I see you 52 weeks a year. I see her 2 weeks a year. So I need to spend time with her, and I'm going to really ask that you support that for me and not take that personal. I want you to understand that. Can you tell me what I'm feeling here? Can you tell me why I would say that to you? Get that feedback loop. It's two-way communication. That's very important. You do want to encourage responsibility. Don't fix everything for these people. You want to encourage responsibility. Do take threats seriously every single time you hear them from a borderline personality. If they make threats, I've had all this I can take, I don't even want to be in this world anymore. That's a veiled suicidal threat. Do take that seriously. Remember, I said 3 C's. You didn't cause it. So you can't take things personally just because they're accusing you and pointing their finger at you. You can't be crushed by that. Don't normalize their dramatic behavior and ignore your intuition when it says it is not okay for them to do what they're doing. If you're seeing them be promiscuous, if you're seeing them take risky behaviors, if you're seeing them do things that you just know in your heart, this is just not okay. But they've done it so much that you just start normalizing it in your mind because you say, I'm just not going to react to this every time. So I just start accepting it as it's just normal. It's just who they are. It is who they are, but it isn't normal. So don't start to normalize their dramatic behavior. It's not okay if he goes out and sleeps with a different girl every 3 days because he gets so deep into relationships so fast that he actually avoids intimacy. It's not okay if she's promiscuous and sleeps with everybody she meets. That's not okay for him or her. It's not okay if they're doing risky behavior, drugs, alcohol, driving under the influence. Those things are not okay. Those are high risk behaviors that puts them in jeopardy because they don't value themselves. Do not allow boundary crossing. When you put up a boundary and you say, okay, we're not going there, we're stopping right here. You're not going to call me at 3:00 in the morning with your drama. Don't allow it. Don't always go the extra mile and be that go-to person for them to vent with. Don't be the one that they call every single time. And you may say, look, I want to be a good friend. I've known them since the 3rd grade. I want to be there for them. No, you're enabling them. You don't want to do that. Don't believe they're going to snap out of it. I don't care what they say. If they say, okay, look, I know you're so great and you've been there for me and I promise you it's the last time. Not going to do this. Yes, they are. They're not going to snap out of it. And you can wear yourself out. You can get up at 3 a.m. You can sit up with them and cry till sunlight. You can assure them 1,000 times that you're not betraying them, that you do love them. They're not going to change. They're not going to change because you can't fix it. They need professional help. Encourage that. Support that when they do it. Now, I don't want to contradict myself because I said don't get sucked into their constant need for attention and validation. Don't play that game. Make it very clear that you love this person. Make it very clear how you feel, that you're there for them, that you love them. But once you've made that clear, you don't need to tell them 10,000 times. This is like someone with an eating disorder, which is very common in borderline personalities, constantly asking their mate or their mom or their dad, do I look fat today? As soon as you start playing that game, they'll ask you 1,000 times. Why? Because they want reassurance. And you think, well, if I tell them no, then they'll relax and not be so focused on it. No, they won't. What they want you to do is tell them again in 3 minutes that they don't look fat today. They get addicted to the reassurance. And then they stop believing you. And now they need more. You can't fix this. They're not going to snap out of it. They're not going to grow out of it. They're not going to snap out of it. They're going to improve with qualified treatment. And it's going to take time. And it's not going to be all or none. They're going to make some progress if they get in treatment and they stick with it. They're going to improve in some areas for a while, and then maybe some other areas for a while. And then they're going to have difficulties, and then they're going to have to really work at it some more. Maybe if it's a spouse, couples therapy will be appropriate. But make this list of 10 people, go down it, and see if you have people in your life that have these traits and characteristics. Now, I'm not asking you to self-diagnose. I'm not asking you to play diagnostician. I'm just asking you to look and see if you feel like these behaviors are present in your life and you need to set boundaries. That's what I'm asking you to do. Do you need to set boundaries? And if you need to set boundaries, then that's the thing that you need to do. Now, there's a whole lot more that I could go into with this. There's something called the Cartman drama triangle about being persecutor, rescuer, victim, and how you get caught in this loop. Look, I'm not trying to conduct a college course here. I'm just trying to tell you that this personality disorder exists. There's like 18 million people in the country that have this disorder. You may encounter people that have this in whole or part. And if you do, then I just want you to be prepared to recognize it and know what you need to do to protect yourself. You need to take care of yourself. Now, you may need to listen to this a couple of times because I've thrown a lot of information and a lot of data at you. But the whole purpose of this is for you to protect yourself. And two of the most predatory personality disorders are the narcissist and the bipolar disorder. That's why I've started with these, because these are the people that you need to recognize and protect yourself against the most. So if you need to listen to these over and over so you recognize it and not get manipulated and victimized by it, then do so. That's the only reason I'm doing this, is because you've asked for this information. So please, please, please do so. Now, I'm not the repository of all knowledge. I don't know all the answers to all the questions, but I'm a good researcher and I have a good, solid, fundamental understanding of these personality disorders, and then I go get the information I need from the people that are vertically developed in this area, that have spent their whole career on this one particular disorder. I talk to them, I call them, I visit with them, I read their research, and I'm translating it and passing it on to you. And I'm really enjoying doing this, and I hope you're enjoying listening and watching and learning. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.